Cancer care is incredibly expensive. 1 in 4 patients files for bankruptcy, and the US spends over $20 billion every year. This doesn't even include the trillions of dollars that have been sunk into the life-saving therapeutics that have transformed cancer into a chronic manageable condition. My name is Jessica Thurmond, and I am the co-founder of Athelo Health. We are the first biometric-anchored virtual coach designed specifically for women with breast and gynecologic cancers. I think it's safe to say that everyone knows someone who has or has had cancer. And if you've ever interacted with the cancer care ecosystem, you know that it's fragmented and challenging to navigate at best. And unfortunately, the patient experience hasn't improved that much since my mom died in 1999 of breast cancer. What we've seen since the pandemic is an increasingly overburdened healthcare system. We anticipated a shortage of over 2,200 oncologists in the US alone in just the next 3 years. With 90% of cancer patients being seen in a community care setting, doctors want to do what's best for their patients, but they often are limited by time and resources. 90% of breast cancer patients are now entering into remission, which is fantastic thanks to the therapeutics that exist. But what this also means is the number of patients and survivors far exceeds the infrastructure of the existing cancer care paradigm. Which brings us to Athelo, where our goal is to bring whole patient integrated care to people who need it most. We're founded upon 3 pillars, the first of which are biometrics, which means we anchor to common wearable devices such as Fitbit and Apple Watch to be able to provide actionable insights and recommendations for how patients can improve their quality of life, both during treatment and remission. The second is peer community. We match women into pods of 5 to 10 in a moderated fashion to be able to provide more meaningful connection as well as a positive experience. And lastly, we believe that you shouldn't have to go to med school to be able to understand some basic information about your care. We take scientifically validated information and distill it down to an 8th grade reading level in a variety of content formats such as video, because we know that every patient learns differently. So ideally, a patient could receive the Athelo platform at the time of diagnosis or during treatment and remission. They would then download the app from the App Store with a unique code, and we then are able to take that information and feed it back to the care team as well as an authorized caregiver in a palatable format and visuals to be able to understand outliers and the true progress of patients in between visits. It should come as no shock to anyone that cancer care is incredibly expensive. 1 in 4 patients files for bankruptcy, and the US spends over $20 billion every year. This doesn't even include the trillions of dollars that have been sunk into the life-saving therapeutics that have transformed cancer into a chronic manageable condition. That being said, we are a B2B SaaS platform that has focused on 3 customer bases, the first of which is biopharmaceutical companies who have a keen interest and willingness to pay for a tool such as the Athelo to be able to track real-world evidence, adverse event reporting, as well as adherence to drugs that are already on the market. The second, of course, are healthcare payers. With the shift towards value-based care, patient engagement and the desire to improve the patient experience and retention has become increasingly important. Thirdly, our healthcare systems. Our goal is to work with oncology-focused healthcare leaders to be able to track the patients. I think one of the areas that we've heard the most interest is also in the remission space, where so often those patients drop off and are lost whenever they move out into the maintenance phase of treatment. While we could talk about business model all day, I want to tell you a little bit about our leadership team. I lead the clinical development of Athelo, and Monica Schmid, my co-founder, leads commercial strategy. I was always taught to surround yourself by the smartest people you possibly can, and that's exactly what we've done the last 2 years with our scientific and strategic advisory team. Lastly, we are raising a $2 to $4 million round in Q1 of next year, depending upon the market fluctuation. We are also asking for any introductions to partnerships within the space, whether they be in any of the 3 categories that we're targeting. The use of this fund will give us 18 to 24 months of runway to be able to continue scaling our team and product with a goal of moving into the GI cancer space next. I want to say thank you so much for being here today and hearing a little bit more about the Athelo mission and vision for how we plan to transform cancer care for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. You're doing great work here. Can you tell us more about the data you're collecting? What are the biometrics that you're collecting, and which data points are the most valuable?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I think if you think about the market of existing wearables that we have today, the majority of them capture a lot of the same pieces. So heart rate variability is one that we look at, respiration rate, sleep and activity levels. And with that, there's some really interesting research that's coming out that's looking at things like heart rate variability as a potential predictor of recurrence and progression of disease. The issue is that so many of the apps that exist in the current state are designed for athletes, and the needs of a cancer patient are incredibly specific and unique, which is also why we've started with a very narrow patient population.
And we have a question here about the competitive landscape. If you can share some of that, and then one of the attendees asking if you have any demos, which she could reach out to you directly about.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have demos, so feel free to reach out. My email address is at the bottom, jessica@athelohealth.com. But in terms of competitive landscape, I think that one thing that makes us unique is a lot of the players in the space are really focused on care navigation, which is really important. But for Monica and myself, we actually come from a clinical trial background. I've spent over 10 years working in oncology clinical trials, where we've seen a lot of remote patient monitoring tools that are really effectively used within that setting. So what we're trying to do is take what we've seen in a clinical trial space and bring it over to the 92% of cancer patients who don't participate in clinical trials. I think another element that's really important that differentiates Athelo is that we work across the entire care continuum for cancer patients. It's not just during active treatment. It's not just during remission. We want to be there as an all-encompassing tool that can be at every stage of a patient's journey. And lastly, I think that the biometric element is really important. We're super focused on accessibility as well as around the social determinants of health. I think that we believe long-term, our goal is to move into the space of CMS because we think those are some of the patients who can really use a tool like Athelo most.
That is great. And talk to us about how you arrived at the business model that you did. Seems like a great tool patients would potentially be willing to pay for, and just talk us through that thinking.
Yeah. So, ever since we started Athelo, like I said, cancer care is expensive. And I don't think that we should have to ever expect a cancer patient to pay additional funds for a tool that really could make a huge difference. For us, arriving at a business model, we really wanted to diversify the way that we can bring in revenue. Obviously, coming from a heavy biopharmaceutical background, it was really intuitive for us to be able to tack something like Athelo on as a digital companion to standard of care, moving away from the clinical trial setting, but also as a way for us to be able to bring in revenue a little bit faster because we know how long the payer cycle is to be able to bring in that revenue. So it's a way for us to continue scaling the product, to be able to continue getting proof of concept and real world evidence about how Athelo works, and then also start running some machine learning models in the next year around the data sets that we've collected. We wanted to really kind of branch out into all the areas. I think with the move towards value-based care, it's really going to require all stakeholders from pharma, providers, and payers to start to cooperate and work together. So we really want to put patients at the center of that. And so direct to consumer has just never been an option for us. We feel that patients need this, but they shouldn't be expected to pay for it.